On Australia Day 2009, a holiday meant for celebration turned into the starting point of an enduring Australian mystery. Bob Chappell, a 65-year-old radiation physicist, vanished without a trace from his newly acquired yacht, the Four Winds, which was moored in the tranquil waters of Sandy Bay, Hobart. His partner of nearly 2 decades, Susan Neill-Fraser, reported him missing the following morning. When police arrived at the scene, they found a disturbing tableau. The yacht was partially submerged, its seacocks deliberately opened in an apparent act of sabotage. There was no sign of Bob Chappell. The search began, but he was never found, leaving only questions in his wake. The initial hours of the investigation were fraught with confusion. The dinghy, which was the only way to get to and from the moored yacht, was also discovered. It had been tied up at a nearby jetty, far from where it should have been. Neill-Fraser told police that Chappell had intended to stay aboard the Four Winds that night to work on the boat, while she returned to shore. Her initial account was that she had spent the evening at home. However, as police began to piece together the timeline, inconsistencies started to emerge in her story. This was the first thread that detectives would pull, a thread that would eventually unravel a case against her. The focus of the police inquiry soon narrowed, shifting decisively towards the person closest to the missing man, Susan Neill-Fraser. Investigators became suspicious of her changing narrative. She initially failed to mention that she had, in fact, returned to the marina late on the night of Australia Day. This omission, later admitted, was a critical turning point. Why had she not been forthcoming about this visit? The police theory was that she had returned to the yacht under the cover of darkness. This secret trip to the waterside became the central pillar of the suspicion building around her, transforming her from a concerned partner into the prime suspect in a presumed murder. The absence of a body presented a significant challenge, but it did not deter the investigation. In the eyes of the police, every detail pointed away from an accident or a random act of violence. The sabotaged yacht, the missing man, and the partner with a story that seemed to be shifting under scrutiny. All these elements combined to form a compelling narrative of foul play. The police alleged that the scene on the Four Winds was not just a crime scene, but a staged one, designed to mislead and conceal a terrible truth. The quiet bay had become the setting for a mystery where the only certainty was that Bob Chappell was gone forever. With no body, no murder weapon, and no confession, the prosecution built its case against Susan Neill-Fraser entirely on circumstantial evidence. The Crown lawyers had to construct a story from a mosaic of small, seemingly disconnected pieces. They argued that Neill-Fraser's motive was twofold: financial gain and a desire to end a strained relationship. They painted a picture of a woman who felt trapped and saw Chappell and his expensive yacht as an obstacle to her future. The prosecution contended that she had killed him on the boat, winched his body up to the deck, transported it in the dinghy, and disposed of it in the deep waters of the River Derwent. The prosecution's narrative relied heavily on Neill-Fraser's inconsistent statements to police. Her initial lie about her whereabouts on the night of the disappearance was presented as evidence of a guilty conscience, an attempt to create a false alibi. They pointed to her late-night visit to the marina, which she had initially denied, as the window of opportunity for the crime. Every contradiction and half-truth was woven into a tapestry of deception. The jury was asked to infer guilt from her behaviour, to see her actions not as those of a panicked and grieving woman, but as the calculated manoeuvres of a killer trying to cover her tracks and mislead the authorities from the very beginning. Forensic evidence was presented to support the theory of a violent confrontation, though it was far from definitive. Luminol testing on the yacht revealed the presumed presence of a large amount of blood in the cabin, which the prosecution argued was consistent with a fatal assault. However, these tests can react to other substances, like bleach, and crucially, no DNA testing could confirm that the substance was Bob Chappell's blood. A red jacket found on a roadside, which Neill-Fraser had been seen wearing, also became part of the evidence puzzle, though its connection to the crime was debated. This lack of concrete physical proof meant the jury had to make significant leaps of faith. The jury was ultimately persuaded by the cumulative weight of these circumstances. They accepted the prosecution's argument that the collection of coincidences and suspicious actions was too great to be explained by anything other than guilt. In October 2010, Susan Neill-Fraser was found guilty of murder and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The verdict was a victory for the prosecution, proving that a conviction could be secured even without the most fundamental pieces of evidence. For Neill-Fraser and her supporters, however, it was the beginning of a long and arduous battle to prove what they saw as a profound miscarriage of justice. A single piece of forensic evidence found on the Four Winds has become the most perplexing and debated aspect of the entire case. On the deck of the yacht, crime scene investigators discovered a DNA sample. When tested, it did not belong to Bob Chappell or Susan Neill-Fraser. Instead, it matched a 15-year-old homeless girl named Megan Vass. At the time of the trial, Vass was a key witness for the prosecution. She testified under oath that she had never been on the yacht and had no idea how her DNA could have gotten there. Her testimony effectively neutralized this piece of evidence, leaving its presence as an unexplained anomaly that the jury was encouraged to disregard. Years after the conviction, the story of Megan Vass took a dramatic turn. She signed a statutory declaration, a sworn legal document, completely recanting her trial testimony. In this new version of events, she claimed she was indeed on the Four Winds on Australia Day 2009. She stated that she was there with two male companions who got into a violent argument with Bob Chappell, which resulted in his death. This explosive confession seemed to provide an alternative explanation for the crime and offered a powerful basis for an appeal. It suggested that others were responsible for Chappell's disappearance and that Neill-Fraser was innocent. This new evidence formed the cornerstone of Neill-Fraser's 2021 appeal. Megan Vass was called to the stand, where it was expected she would repeat the contents of her affidavit. However, under the intense pressure of cross-examination, her testimony unraveled once more. She became confused and distressed, ultimately reverting to her original story and denying that she had been on the yacht. Her performance was erratic, and the court found her to be an unreliable witness. The judges, in a 2-1 majority decision, dismissed the appeal, ruling that her recanted confession was not credible and did not establish fresh and compelling evidence of a miscarriage of justice. The mystery of the Vass DNA remains officially unsolved. How did the DNA of a homeless teenager who has given multiple contradictory accounts end up on the deck of a murdered man's yacht? The court's dismissal of her recanted testimony left this crucial question unanswered. For Neill-Fraser's supporters, it is the single most compelling piece of evidence pointing to her innocence, proof that someone else was on the boat that night. For the prosecution and the courts, it is an inconvenient but ultimately irrelevant detail in a case they believe was correctly decided based on the powerful circumstantial evidence against Neill-Fraser herself. The legal battle for Susan Neill-Fraser's freedom has been long and fraught with setbacks. Her first appeal in 2012 was dismissed. The 2021 appeal, based on Megan Vass's recanted testimony, ended in a split decision. 2 judges upheld the conviction, finding Vass's new evidence unreliable. However, one judge, Justice Estcourt, delivered a powerful dissent. He argued that the new evidence, combined with the weaknesses of the original circumstantial case, meant that Neill-Fraser had suffered a substantial miscarriage of justice. This dissenting opinion gave strength to her supporters' claims. A final attempt to take the case to the High Court of Australia was refused in 2022, exhausting her legal avenues. The case has deeply divided public opinion and the legal community in Australia. On one side are those who believe the jury's verdict was correct. They point to Neill-Fraser's lies to police, her inconsistent statements, and her unexplained late-night visit to the marina as clear indicators of guilt. They argue that the circumstantial case, when viewed in its entirety, is strong, and that the justice system has repeatedly reviewed the evidence, and found the conviction to be safe. From this perspective, the continued campaign for her innocence is an unwarranted attack on the integrity of the courts and the jury's decision, which was based on the evidence presented at trial. On the other side is a large and vocal movement that believes Susan Neill-Fraser is the victim of a wrongful conviction. Her supporters, including many legal experts and prominent Australians, argue that the absence of a body, a weapon, and a clear motive makes the conviction unsafe. They highlight the unexplained DNA of Megan Vass as definitive proof that the police investigation was flawed and that other suspects were not properly investigated. They see the case as a textbook example of a miscarriage of justice, where confirmation bias led police to focus on one suspect to the exclusion of all other possibilities, building a case on suspicion rather than proof. Released on parole in October 2022, Susan Neill-Fraser continues to maintain her innocence, though she is now legally barred by her parole conditions from speaking about it publicly. The case endures as one of Australia's most controversial legal battles, raising fundamental questions about the nature of justice. Can a person be securely convicted of murder on purely circumstantial evidence? What happens when new evidence emerges that casts doubt on a verdict, but the witness is deemed unreliable? The unanswered questions surrounding the disappearance of Bob Chappell ensure that, for many, the case of Susan Neill-Fraser is not over. It remains a stark reminder of the fallibility of the justice system.